All right, I'd like to call this meeting to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
City Council members Ammons.
Here.
Brown.
Here.
Hazen.
Here.
Jacobson.
Here.
Miller.
Here.
Roberts.
Here.
Wu.
Here.
Mayor Marlin.
Here. Minutes from the previous meetings of January 16th and January 22nd, which was a special meeting. Is there a motion for approval?
I'll move approval of the minutes from the January 16th and January 22nd special meeting.
I'll second.
Moved by Jared, seconded by Dennis. Any corrections?
Mayor,
Yes.
there was one small extra word on the back page of one of the minutes, which I've corrected in my copy. In the regular minutes, there was an extra word before somebody's, before the
Talking about page 6?
right at the, yeah, at the very end, just above adjournment, the body went back into open session via motion. There's an extra word in there. I deleted it.
Okay. All right. Any other corrections? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. That motion passes. Any additions to the agenda? Okay. Public input. I have a card from Bishop King James Underwood, who chooses not to address the members, but he says we are still concerned about the Dr. Ellis subdivision sewer problem. Terry Townsend, regarding the Housing Authority appointment. That won't count against you.
Yeah, we're not starting the clock yet.
In my time frame.
Okay, you have 5 minutes.
Okay, Terry Townsend, former vice chairman of the Housing Authority of Champaign County. I was a city member when the Illinois Housing Authority Act was amended. I was appointed by the Champaign County Board. At that time, the city of Urbana did not have appointment authority. I've become somewhat of an expert on this and have been dealing with other municipalities and the county board as it relates to appointment authority and reach of that authority. I have a letter here to Mayor Marlin, but I'm not going to give it to her or the council. I'm going to read excerpts from it because I think her comments were excellent, as were the township supervisor, as it relates to her appointment to the Housing Authority of Champaign County. And I'm going to be very selective when I read this. What the Housing Authority is doing is to ask you to be conclusory before the issue of conflict interest is decided. Your actions could discourage elected officials from sitting on PHA boards throughout the state of Illinois, and it could chill state law and the intergovernmental agreement. But more immediate, it appears that the Housing Authority of Champaign County has violated its bylaws and the Illinois Housing Authority Act. Let me be clear. You've been talking about the bylaws. I'm going to read their bylaws to you, just this one paragraph. It's section 7. It pertains to the removal of a housing commissioner. Whenever it shall appear to a majority of commissioners that a commissioner is guilty of neglect or duty or malfeasance, the chairperson shall require such commissioner to appear before the board to show cause why he should not be recommended to the appointment authority of the county for removal from office pursuant to Section 10-4 of the Housing Authority Act 310 ILCS 10-4. Council, I'm sure you noted that. The intergovernmental agreement amends state law and allows cities to appoint and remove housing authority commissioners. The HACC has not updated its bylaws. Notwithstanding this, the aforementioned error, no hearing was held to allow Ms. Chenoweth the opportunity to speak to this issue. In addition, HACC denied her access to some important housing authority operations. All units of government should be concerned about the HACC officials' behavior. My recommendations to the mayor and to this council. At this juncture, the city of Urbana should deny the housing authority's recommendation, which I think you have already done that, and refer this matter to the proper legal authorities. Now, the elephant in the room, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. HUD may take action if there's a finding of conflict of interest. Authority for such action is from the Annual Contributions Contract, the ACC, Section 19. Such actions include waiving a conflict of interest finding, and HUD will not knowingly support a deliberate violation of law by any PHA. And errors and omissions insurance will not protect a public official that deliberately violates law. It is my personal opinion that Ms. Chenoweth has legal options. I defended Ms. Turnbull at the county board when the chairman of the county board and members told her just to go sit down at the housing authority. After we came up with the intergovernmental agreement, the cities and the county didn't pay very much attention to any of this. I had to go back in and research the law and explain it over and over and over. After a prolonged fight at the county board level, the county board, state's attorney, and HUD all agreed that I knew what I was talking about as it related to appointment authorities. I'm doing that again tonight because no one is above the law.
You have
Before
30
can-
seconds, Mr. Townsend.
Thank you, thank you. Before you can even get to the conflict of interest issue, there are some other issues here that are before you, and I hope that you consider those. I was on the housing board for 10 years. This is my 50th year advocating for housing. I can assure you that I haven't heard anything, the things that I heard here tonight were very good, and I applaud you for your support and your advocacy. Thank you. If there's any questions you have, I'll try to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Townsend. Okay, we have one presentation scheduled for tonight, CU Folk and Roots. You have 5 minutes.
All right, I'll be quick. Thank you, sir. So my name is Rob Crum. I live here in Urbana, longtime resident, and I've been involved with the Folk and Roots Festival since we started, which we just finished our 9th festival. And I'm here tonight just to give a brief report and say thanks to the City Council for your continued funding and support of the festival. I know you've been here for a long time. I will try to make this brief. Kind of in a nutshell, we had a great 9th festival in early November. I saw some of you there, so the folks who were there know it was a good time. Was basically 80 performances of various sorts, hands-on workshops, activities for kids of all ages, a lot of performances, dances, storytelling, and we had a crowd of about 1,700 people, 1,700 to 1,800. So the city supported the festival with a $5,000 grant, and that helped us pay for a lot of the festival expenses, hiring performers, support logistics, pay for lodging, help publicity. So really, you know, the most important thing I could say is thank you for the funding. We really appreciate that. So the T-shirts started showing up everywhere. If you didn't get one, I apologize. But Diane got a T-shirt and helped us with a little publicity, so I appreciate that. So this is just a map of the venues where we ran the festival. This is a little aerial photography of downtown. And you can see there on the left, basically the festival's kind of centered at Ray Street and Main Street, kind of out from there. We also had one activity at the Cranert Center, which we've been doing. So here's what I have to say about, you know, the city, having the festival downtown is, you know, we had the festival downtown for a reason, because it works really well. You know, people can get there, there's plenty of parking, they can take the bus, they can walk, ride their bike, and once they get there, it's easy to walk around everywhere. And we hear so many good things from people who come to the festival, new people who are coming from out of town. You know, they love the feel of the festival, they love downtown Urbana, it's so easy to get around. You know, they feel safe on the streets, and you know, and they just like the feel of the downtown area with the businesses. And anyway, so we're really happy to have the festival in downtown. So these are just a few pictures I've scattered in. A lot of performances. We do an event at Busey Bank every year. A lot of things at the Iron Post. This is a great blues band from the Chicago area. So the city is part of a network of supporters and donors. We get a lot of support in the community. I won't read through everything, but I will point out we hit a new reality this year. We got support from HomeAdvisor.com, strictly an online business that seemed to want to have a little more presence in the community. So we get a lot of in-kind support from businesses and organizations, and so this is just a scene from the Rose Bowl. That gentleman standing on the chair with the guitar was the featured performer. So needless to say, the performers like coming to the festival too. That was a guy named Steve Poltz, and the Rose Bowl was jammed. Marevo Lindo from Chicago, great fiddle player. Chicago Farmer from Bloomington Normal, also at the Rose Bowl. I'd say this about the festival: it's good to be a kid here in Urbana. We had a great series of kids programs at the Community Center for the Arts, including it was nice enough to have a parade outside, which is fun. So the festival events were well attended. As I said, we do a kickoff event at Crandert every year. We do a lot of daytime free events on Saturday, and this year on Saturday, November 4th, we had an attendance of about 400 people at those free events, and that's part of the funding from the city. It helps us keep the festival, part of the festival. We strongly believe we want to keep it no cost, so families can come, anyone can come, keep it accessible. So we have a lot of stuff during the day. As long as the sun is shining on Saturday, the festival's been totally free, and we like to keep it that way. Some more performer photographs to kind of give you a flavor of what went on. The Urbana Free Library, I can't say enough about the staff at the library. They really have helped the festival. I'll just finish up here. Some more photos. And this really was kind of like the late night end of the festival jam. This was really early Sunday morning, November 5th. But we still had people hanging in there at like 2 in the morning. So anyway, so we had a lot of great comments. We're getting a lot of visitors. We tried to make an effort to figure out where people were from this year. So we had people from really all over Illinois, besides Urbana, Champaign, and Savoy, Mahomet. These are just the people we talked to, which is a sampling. We had 18 other cities in Illinois represented, people from around the country, different states. We had one gentleman I talked to from Watford, England, and he's coming back next year. So his son's going to school here at U of I too, but he had a great time. He said it was a real bash. That's what. Anyway, so the festival's gaining a good reputation among music fans, and again, we appreciate the support of the City Council.
Dennis.
Well, I love it. The fact that it centers in the downtown certainly serves the goals of the community to make the downtown interesting and inviting. And as I recall, the businesses that support the festival venues benefit by selling food and beer. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, I would just say this, since the beginning of the festival, we really developed a good relationship with a lot of the people who run businesses in downtown Urbana. We use the Iron Post as one of the festival venues, so we have a good relationship with Paul Worth. At the Rose Bowl, I always tease him, Smiling Steve Campbell. I've developed a good relationship with Steve. And, you know, I think the festival works at these places. The same for Pizza M, Matt Kitzmiller, good staff, and we also use Community Center for the Arts, which is run by Robin Kierton, and, you know, can't say enough about that either. So, you know, we do have a great relationship going with all the places where we hold the festival. Urbana Free Library, once again, it's a great fit for the library and for the other businesses and organizations as well.
And I understand that you also conduct a permanent stage during other festivals in Urbana.
Well, we've had a good relationship with the Sweet Corn Festival, so we've been doing a stage there. This will be our 5th year coming up, 2018. So we helped the Sweet Corn Festival. We worked together with them to basically put up a stage there, and we've also worked with Urbana Park District to help them sponsor their summer concerts at the Lake House at Crystal Lake Park. So we were active also with Urbana First Fridays last year, and we'll probably be a little more active with the First Friday events through the summer. Anyway.
Thank you, Rob.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, reports of standing committees. Committee of the Whole. Councilmember Aaron Ammons.
All right. So, resolution number 2018-01-003R, a resolution authorizing acceptance of an Illinois Arts Council Agency, IACA grant for public arts programs operating support, FY 2018 Urbana Arts Program, Community Development. On behalf of the committee, I so move.
I'll second.
Moved by Aaron, seconded by Jared. Any further discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
City Council members Ammons.
Yes.
Brown.
Yes.
Hazen.
Yes.
Jacobson.
Yes.
Miller.
Yes.
Roberts.
Yes.
And Wu.
Yes.
Ordinance number 2017-12.
That motion passes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Now you can go.
Ordinance number 2017-12-069, an ordinance to repeal Urbana City Code, Chapter 24, Article 4, Section 24-100, Champaign Urbana Cable and Telecommunications Commission. On behalf of the committee, I so move.
Second.
Moved by Aaron, seconded by Bill. Any further discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
City Council members Wu.
Yes.
Roberts.
Yes.
Miller.
Yes.
Jacobson.
Yes.
Hazen.
Yes.
Brown.
Yes.
Ammons.
Yes.
That motion passes.
Ordinance number 2018-01-002, an ordinance authorizing the jurisdictional transfer of a certain highway from Somer Township to the city of Urbana, a portion of Lincoln Avenue from Centennial Farm Road to Olympian Drive. On behalf of the committee, I so move.
I'll second that one.
Moved by moved by Aaron, seconded by Dennis. Any further discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
City Council members Ammons.
Yes.
Brown.
Yes.
Hazen.
Yes.
Jacobson.
Yes.
Miller.
Yes.
Roberts.
Yes.
Wu.
Yes.
That motion passes.
Ordinance number 2018-01-003, an ordinance granting consent to assign certain agreements for use of right-of-ways.
Could
Rights
back up a
of way.
second, please. Mayor Marlin, I think I need your vote on that one too, please, on the transfer.
Yes.
Thank you, just in case.
That motion passes.
Again.
Ordinance number 2018-01-003, an ordinance granting consent to assign certain agreements for use of right-of-way, rights of way. On behalf of the committee, I so move.
Second.
Moved by Aaron, seconded by Jared. Any discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
City Council members Ammons.
Yes.
Brown.
Yes.
Hazen.
Yes.
Jacobson.
Yes.
Miller.
Yes.
Roberts.
Yes.
And Wu.
Yes.
That motion passes.
Resolution number 2018-01-002R, a resolution approving an agreement with the Illinois Department of Transportation for construction and maintenance of a shared use path, Cunningham Avenue from Kenyon Road to Napleton Way. On behalf of the committee, I so move.
Moved by Aaron, seconded by Mary Alice. Any further discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
City Council members Ammons.
Yes.
Brown.
Yes.
Hazen.
Yes.
Jacobson.
Yes.
Miller.
Yes.
Roberts.
A strong yes.
Wu.
Yes.
Do I vote on that one, Charlie?
It doesn't show that. I'll go ahead and get your vote and just check.
That would be a yes, just in case. Okay.
Ordinance number 2018-01-004, an ordinance amending the zoning ordinance of the City of Urbana multifamily parking. On behalf of the committee, I so move.
I'll-
Is there a second? And we do have discussion on this one.
I'll second.
So moved by Aaron, seconded by Jared, and staff would ask you to consider a slight tweaking of the amendment that you passed last week, so they'll be discussing that now.
Thank you, and we will be brief. There were 2 points that came out of the discussion on the January 22nd committee meeting. The first, of course, you did forward the recommendation that the number of spaces, parking spaces per bedroom, be set at 0.7 for single unit, or for single bedroom units only. What we are suggesting is that you consider a 2 parking spaces per every 3 bedroom, or excuse me, 2 parking spaces for every 3 one-bedroom units, which is very similar to 0.7, but as you can see on the table on page 2, when we compare the current requirement to 2 spaces per 3 one-bedroom units to the 0.7 requirements, that you rarely get to the 30% reduction, which I think is what you might have been going for when you suggested the 0.7 spaces per unit. You rarely get that at 0.7 because of the need to round up to the nearest whole number. So if you actually look at that table, you see that when you do the 2 spaces per 3 one-bedroom units, that you really get to that 30% more often. So we are suggesting that you consider that tonight. However, the resolution before you is written at 0.7, so it would need to be amended. The second issue that came up was a question about how many parking spaces are on street as supply. How many parking spaces are on street in the West Urbana parking zone, the permit parking zone? Because we did supply some information on how many parking permits are issued in that zone, which I think is 343. So Kevin's just going to briefly talk about, he basically counted all of those spaces that are in the parking zone.
Yeah, so I will be very brief. Lori is right. The amount of permits that are pulled in that zone is 343. The total amount of spaces is 1,070, and that took a little time to count, but it was a fun exercise. In addition, I thought it would be interesting to look at spaces in proximity to apartment buildings, since that's what we're talking about here. A lot of the spaces in West Urbana are not near apartment buildings. So in terms of spaces that are near apartment buildings, there are 431 on-street spaces, and just as a refresher, there are 96 permits that are pulled by residents in apartment buildings.
For a difference of?
So there's essentially 335 surplus spaces for apartment unit dwellers in West Urbana.
Questions? Aaron?
So Kevin, you said the 335 surplus spaces, but those 335 are for home, or for rental homes, or for homeowners also, right? So
They are. So those spaces they'd be shared, since anybody who has a permit can use those spaces. I have a map of that, of the whole area as well, if you'd like to take a look at it, just so you can see sort of the proximity, where these spaces are.
well, I think the overall question for me is, I'm just trying to understand that even in relationship to the spaces and the permits, is that, from your estimation, adequate parking if we take that in conjunction with the proposal that you guys are presenting to us tonight for West Urbana, right?
If my math is right, I believe the total number of parking supply on street is about 3 times the number of permits that are pulled. Did I get that right, Kevin?
Let's
So
see.
343
Yeah, 343 to
plus or minus.
to
It's in my head.
1070.
Oh, I don't know if I completely understand the answer there. So are you saying that you do think it's more than adequate parking for?
Yes, there's over 1,000 spaces available, and 343 people pull permits. So there's a 600 and some difference.
So the permits are the,
Everybody. The 343 is everybody, right, Kevin?
Correct. Yes. And that's represented on this map. I don't. The legend is a bit further down. The numbers you see on the map are the permits pulled for each block. The dots those represent on-street parking spaces. And it's kind of hard to see. So green dots are ones that are. Oh, sorry. The green parcels are apartment parcels. So then the green dots are spaces that are close to apartment parcels, and then there's yellow dots. Maybe I should have picked a better contrast, but yellow dots are ones that are not close to apartment parcels.
so I'm just trying to make sure I'm clear then. So this is West Urbana, and you're saying that everyone has to have a permit.
No.
If you want to park overnight, you need to have a permit.
So basically, from what you're presenting tonight is that the 343 permits are the number of people who live in this, basically live in this area,
That have pulled permits, yeah.
full permits. Okay. And so that leaves hundreds of spaces for people to park total overall, but the green dots are the ones that are close to apartment complexes. Now, the apartment complexes, do they all currently provide parking for all of their residents, for all of their occupants?
It varies. Some of them do. Some of them, especially older ones, were built before, there might be some that, there are a few that have no parking spaces, but some of them might be deficient, might have less parking. But that's what our whole survey of the apartment buildings, we were trying to get at what the off-street parking situation looked like.
Okay, all right.
Bill?
So our current zoning ordinance is from early 90s, I think. Were there parking requirements for apartments that were built before that? Does anybody know?
Likely, I mean, a lot of zoning really ratcheted up the parking requirements in the 60s, so we probably had a variety of iterations, but if we went back to the 65 or thereabouts zoning ordinance, it would probably start instituting a parking minimum.
Okay. I mean, I actually got up and did some reconnaissance in the middle of the night a couple of times and drove around this area, and it does seem like the Greek houses in the south that were built, in the 20s or whatever, when people didn't really bring cars to campus, several of them seem to have really crowded streets around that area. And then there was at least 1 or 2 blocks in the north. I noticed one of them had like some apartments that looked like they were probably built in the 70s, the cedar-sided apartments that had a little bit of underground parking and then really not much other parking, and they were like 4 or 5 bedroom apartments. So I think, for those 2 areas, I can see why it's so crowded there, and I don't see how having excessive parking in our ordinance is going to solve that, because you're just going to have the new apartments that do get built there would have extra spaces, but it's not going to help the existing problem. It may not contribute any additional to the streets, but it sounds like from your surveys that what we have, at least for this area, is adequate, and probably too much on the other side of the street. As you go over on the west side of Green Street, there were several empty spots in apartment parking lots. It just kind of depended how many international students they got and how many grad students, things like that. So I'm in favor of a reduction. I'm not convinced we should go for 2 for every 3 or 3 for every 4. So I'm interested in discussing that further after other questions. Oh, and I did notice that, you know, driving around where all the yellow dots are, once you got really, even from the crowded areas, it didn't seem like people would park more than a couple blocks away from, say, the Greek houses. So, yeah, once you got past Orchard and south of Michigan, it was pretty sparse, maybe one or two cars on a street.
Any other questions? Mary Alice?
I guess mine's perhaps not a question, maybe I should wait, but I will say thank you, first of all, because I know it's a lot of work to go around counting a lot of parking spaces.
Well, he did do it virtually.
Yes,
And you did it virtually.
It helps. Yeah,
You
it
didn't
helps.
like walk the neighborhood.
No, Street View, aerials, and some basic math.
Still, it's a lot of screen time, so thank you. I appreciate it. I also appreciate looking at the map and where the parking spots are. I think that, you know, one of the challenges that we face in West Urbana is the 800, the 700, and the 600 block, and I think that is shown very correctly here, as you see all these yellow dots and so forth. It is very congested on those 800 and 700 blocks. I think people are concerned about pushing that to the 6 and the 5 and the 4 and just keep going down the line, so to speak. But this is helpful. I will say that originally I was going to propose a 0.75, and then I saw how the rounding is done, and I am fine with and willing to support the 0.7, but I also know that in your memo you had mentioned that it's a little difficult to talk about 0.7 spaces per bedroom, so if it would be easier to talk about 3 out of 4, like if you have 4 single-bedroom apartments, 3 spots, if that's easier to say than to say 0.7. Either one is fine with me, but the numbers at the end of the day in this chart are what I would be willing to support for the 0.7.
Dennis?
Well, when we first started the discussion about reduction, what I had offered was 0.66. Well, okay, so it wasn't supported by members of the council. I still think it's a valid thing to consider. That's 2 for 3. It seems like to me that you're getting the reduction that you need without losing appropriate spaces. So I'll just say that I support that. But on the other hand, you know, Mary Alice is the one who represents the West Urbana ward to the highest degree, and I appreciate the fact that she came down from 7.5 to 7, and I'm going to ask her if she'd like to consider 6.6.
Could we clarify one thing? I think it hasn't been mentioned yet, that this ordinance applies to the entire city, not just West Urbana, correct?
Yes.
That's correct.
Okay.
But we would be rounding up anyway, right?
We would be. But the rounding up would just end up being slightly different depending on what number you were going to round up.
We round up at the end, not at, if that helps.
Any other questions? Council discussion. Dennis?
All right, well, just to test, you know, how many people care about 0.66, I'll make a motion to amend the ordinance as prepared, which has a 0.7 figure, to 0.66, which slightly changes the proportion of parking available. And if it gets support, fine. If it doesn't, we'll know where we are.
Is there a second for that motion? Was that a finger? Or-
Was a finger to be recognized.
Oh, Eric,
It wasn't a finger
yes.
to second. So 0.66 isn't exactly 2 out of every 3 because of the way the rounding works. So I'll move to amend the proposed ordinance to 2 out of every 3
We have a
one-bedroom.
motion on the floor.
There's a motion on the floor.
Which is that motion?
Which is that,
So the motion on the
2 out of
floor-
every 3, it becomes a 0.66 percentage.
but
Repeating.
I didn't think 0.66 was seconded. Was it seconded?
Not yet.
That's what they're waiting for.
It's dying on the field here. unless
It's
something-
dying, okay. It hasn't yet died for lack of a second. It's still mortally wounded, okay.
So you're not seconding?
I'm not
Okay. Is there a second for this motion? Okay.
But if Eric wants to make the same motion, I'll second it.
Well, I'll move, yeah, it's different in the rounding. I'll move that, I'll move the staff suggestion of 2 out of every 3.
2 out of 3.
Yeah,
Is
2
there
out
a
of 3,
second
every
for
3
that?
bedrooms, too.
And I'll second that.
Okay, so
For, just for discussion.
By Eric, seconded by Dennis to amend the motion. Discussion.
Yeah, I don't know. I think we're getting close, and so it would make a difference probably in some, by one space in some of the buildings that that would be built in the MOR district maybe. I think most of those have about 5 units, and so you might get one fewer space there. And if you have a building with 100 units, it'd be what, 4 spaces different. So I don't know how much difference and how much time we want to spend arguing about it, but I'm kind of okay with either one. So if anybody has a stronger reason to go with 3 out of 4, talk
Eric,
about it.
or Jared, and then Dennis.
So I think maybe we can consider it in the manner purely of taking it in a smaller step at first than a larger one. I think the whole point of why it became controversy in the first place was going from 1 to 0.5, which was a dramatic reduction. 3 out of every 4, or 0.75, is happy in between. I'm sorry, Diane.
Sorry.
Between those two, and I would support moving in a smaller increment first. So I would support 3 out of 4. It's not like this is set in stone for forever, and we can't revisit it again if this is a mistake, and we find that we can afford a greater reduction later on in the future. We can always change it again.
So you're increasing what was in the motion passed last week?
I believe that was Mary Alice's intention, was to move to a 0.75.
So my intention was the actual numbers at the end of the day in this chart. So I was rounding differently when I was calculating my table in terms of what would be 3. Since you guys round up always, that's why I decided that 0.7 was fine, because it basically takes care of that. The question then is does it make more sense to say that you need 2, if you have 3 single-bedroom apartments, does that mean that you need 2 parking spaces? Or if you have 4 single-bedroom apartments, do you need 3? That's the quandary now. Is it a 0.7, 0.66, 0.75, or is it 2 out of 3, 3 out of 4? I'm willing to support either 3 out of 4 or 0.7. Those are the 2 things that I'm willing to do, just to be clear.
Dennis.
Okay, so my argument is that if we're talking about trying to encourage development in the community, I would think that those people who are going to be building new apartments would prefer to have a more lenient parking restriction, and that it might actually assist some development to occur.
So the motion on the floor is 2 out of 3
To amend.
to amend. And we vote on that first?
And could I get clarification?
Sure.
So when I was considering it, I was considering that if the if the multiple ended up in a number that was higher than 0.5 or lower than 0.5, one would reduce or add. But you're saying that any time that there's a fraction, you're pushing it up to the
It has to be
higher.
the next, it has to be the whole number, the next
And it can't
largest
be,
whole
you
number.
can't round down. You're not
Not for
rounding down.
parking, no. It's a minimum, so that means we have to round up.
Okay, well, okay, I thought I was going to approve it. All right, that's fine. I guess that's kind of worse, actually, I think. I think when you take 0.7, it's actually more restrictive than 2 to 3.
Mhm. Are we ready to vote on the amendment? And that's Bill?
I know Champaign doesn't have any parking requirements now for downtown and campus, I guess, but there was one building proposed recently that proposed some parking because they thought somebody might need it. Do you happen to know what kind of ratio they used, or?
Not off the top of my head. I did get some numbers from Champaign a few weeks back, but I don't have those with me.
Yeah, I mean, they claim the market's supposed to determine what parking is needed. But in our case, the market's a little distorted because we offer this on-street parking at usually a lower rate. Okay, thanks.
Okay, the motion on the floor is to amend the original motion, to amend it to 2 out of every 3 single-bedroom units. 1 space. Would you state the motion?
2 parking spaces for every 3 bedrooms, and that only applies to the single units.
Gotcha. Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
So if there are 3, if there's 4 apartments,
And they're all single bedroom?
and they're all single bedroom.
Thank you.
That's three parking spaces?
Correct.
Correct.
Because you round up.
Because you round up. Okay. I still like the .7 better.
Okay. Do we do roll call? Voice, all those in favor of the amendment for 2 out of 3? 2
Aye.
out of 3.
Yes.
Please say aye.
Aye.
Can you show hands, please, so I make sure? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. All those opposed?
No.
No.
So
Okay,
3.
wait, I think I'm. I'm
That
not understanding
amendment, that
something.
motion passes.
Okay, I don't understand what just happened. I thought we would, 2 out of 3 is the point.
6.
It's .66.
Repeating.
0.67, yeah. It's 0.67.
I'm so lost in the math, I'm just trying to compromise.
So
Okay.
I want to be clear because kind of what Councilman Roberts was saying is that Councilmember Wu has the largest number of folks affected by this. Well, it's for the whole city though, right?
This covers the entire city.
The whole city. It can be separated.
And only new construction.
That is something I did not understand in the last vote either. I thought it was just West Urbana, so
No, that was the focus of the discussion.
that was my mistake, yeah.
All right, so I want to change my vote to the .7. So that would be a no to the proposal.
Okay, so that motion is now defeated. We are back to the original motion, which is .7. Any further discussion? All those in, will the clerk please call the roll?
City Council members Ammons.
Yes.
Brown.
Yes.
Hazen.
Yes.
Jacobson.
Yes.
Miller.
Yes.
Roberts.
Well, deferring to the needs of the council to approve it, I'll say yes also.
Wu.
Yes.
That motion passes
At .7, right?
At .7.
at .7.
Just needed to ground myself there.
Ordinance number 2018-01-005, an ordinance amending the zoning ordinance of the city of Urbana. On behalf of the committee, I so move.
I'll second.
Moved by Aaron, seconded by Jared. Any further discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
City Council members Ammons.
Yes.
Brown.
Yes.
Hazen.
Yes.
Jacobson.
Yes.
Miller.
Yes.
Roberts.
Yes.
And Wu.
Yes.
That motion passes. Reports of special committees. Okay. Reports of officers. We have one from Chief Morgan on a cannabis update.
Good evening. You should all have this handout. There's only 2 slides on this PowerPoint I put up here for everybody to see. A couple points I want to draw your attention to related to the chart that might be a little confusing and that might clarify some things for people, and then any questions you have about the charts. So this first one is, as the title suggests, is times that a crime code is put on a police report. And why that's important is because if we ran into maybe a group of people, let's say 3 people, and they all were in possession of cannabis, there may be 3 people technically that could be charged with that. offense, but we only write it on a police report one time. There was, as the crime that was committed. So that's an important distinction. It's very difficult for us to then go through every single police report and get those numbers. But so these are, that's why sometimes the numbers may not exactly add up when we start talking about how many times that crime code was put on a police report and how many times somebody may have been charged with something or arrested or given an NTA. So there's not huge difference if you looked at the numbers, but it is important to note that that is maybe why some of the numbers don't exactly add up when you think that they should. All right, so you can see by the top line that those are all of the non-criminal violations. So we had a new law, state law, that went into effect in 2016, in July of 2016. And that was for anything 10 grams or less of cannabis, in possession of cannabis 10 grams or less, which was a civil violation. Now, you'll see in 2016 we had 15 of those, and in 2017 we had 51 of those. Now, those are just the times that that crime code was put on a police report. Nobody has been charged with that civil offense. We never got the citations for those civil offenses, and we have simply we don't charge people for that. If someone's going to be charged in the city of Urbana for 10 grams or less, they would be given a city ordinance violation. So that, I just want to make clear that what those numbers are there, even though it says that's how many times we had someone that was in possession of 10 grams or less, they weren't charged with anything. Does that make sense? No, go ahead, Mary Alice. I don't want to lose you on this, anybody on this. So it is confusing because so this was a simple, I know you guys asked for an update on some of the numbers since we changed the fine amount from 300 down to 50. And so in trying to be all-encompassing and showing state and the civil and the city violations and stuff, that's what this looks like. So it's not really pretty. That's why I'm trying to make it make sense for you, okay? So go ahead with your question.
Okay, so in 2016, July 2016, the state did change the ticket that you're going to write if somebody gets caught with 10 grams or less.
Correct.
Okay. So when they do that, let's say I'm a person, I get stopped, I have 10 grams or less. Do I get a city ticket or do I get a state civil ticket?
So you could get either. However, we made a decision that we were not going to issue state civil violation tickets. So if that was written on a crime report, if that code was written on the crime report, that means someone was in possession of 10 grams or less.
Okay.
And they were not given a city ordinance violation, because that number's in the bottom row. So there were 22 in 2016 that got a city possession, and 19 of them in 2017. And the 15 and 51 people in the top row were in possession of cannabis and were not ever charged with it. Either city or civil violation.
They
Correct.
didn't get anything. So 51
Correct.
people just walked away.
More often than not, they were arrested maybe for something else, or they were committing a crime for something else, and then we found a bag of cannabis on their person, and we did not charge them with it.
So basically, in 2017, there were only 19 people who walked away with a ticket of some kind.
Correct.
Okay. I got it. Thank you.
Yes.
Yes, I'm still a little unclear on, you say you don't charge them. If somebody's arrested for something else and this crime code's on the report, isn't it up to the state's attorney whether she charges them or not?
No, not necessarily. So we take crime reports all the time and don't necessarily arrest or charge anybody with things. We may write the police report. Say, for instance, we have a burglary. We don't know who did it. I mean, we write that police report. We still had a burglary. So whether or not we charge someone with something, if we arrest them and send it over to the state's attorney's office, then they make a decision about that. Especially with small amounts of cannabis. We've been doing this for years. People don't get charged with small amounts of cannabis. Depending on the circumstances, if they've been found in possession multiple times, then they may end up getting some type of an enforcement. But if they've never had a problem before, or we had contact with them for some other reason, and they just have a small bag on them, or they have a joint on them, or something like that, it's not uncommon that we would not charge them at all.
So and I understand the state's attorney will often drop the charge or use it to negotiate something else. So the lower line, the possession city ordinance, does that mean they had more than 10 grams? Because our city ordinance covers up to 28 grams or something?
I believe
Yeah.
our city ordinance is silent on an amount.
Oh, really?
Yes.
So how much did they
Is,
have?
when I looked, yeah, exactly. So I think that is there in place for small amounts of cannabis that aren't packaged like for sale, like they're not selling them. So there's just for their personal use. I assumed also that the city ordinance was for 30 grams and less, but when I reread the ordinance, I did not see that in there. It was kind of vague, and if somebody wants to look that up, and maybe I was half asleep that day, but I did look that up, and I saw that it was silent on it. However, it is just for possession. So if somebody had multiple bags or they had a scale with them that was indicative of them selling, then that would be different. Then that would go to a state charge.
Okay.
All right, so that takes care of all the civil or non-criminal. That's the top section. The next section is all the misdemeanor charges. And if you notice the second line, that is also as a result of the change in the state law, where they changed the 10 grams or less being a civil violation. They also changed the misdemeanor amount for possession of cannabis to be between 10 and 100 grams, whereas before it was for 30 grams and under. So we wrote out there old, meaning that's the old crime code. So you'll notice in 2017 there are none of those because that was no longer a law that was in effect in 2017. The new law that came into effect in July of 2016 then is when we started tracking the 10 to 100 grams for a misdemeanor amount of cannabis. Then we still have the delivery or manufacturer of cannabis, 30 grams and under, which is a misdemeanor. And then the next section is felonies. Yes, Bill.
I think I remember why it didn't have to say 30 grams, because if it's more than 30 grams, it's automatically a state charge. And then we don't have any jurisdiction over that.
Yeah, so that's no longer technically the case because they changed the law
To 10 to 100.
to being a felony. So over 30 grams used to be a felony, and now it's not. It has to be over 100 grams
But
to be a
it's
felony.
misdemeanor if it's a misdemeanor under 30 to 10, right?
10 to 100.
It's a misdemeanor, yes, but it doesn't mean we have to charge them. So a lot of city ordinances
Okay, it's
can
just
also
if
be a
it's
misdemeanor
felony. I
state.
see.
Yes.
So we might have to update ours if we want it to be 30 grams. Otherwise, it
So
looks
because
like
it's silent on it, in theory, you could
So it's
still
100
charge.
basically.
Yes.
right now.
Yeah. All right, so
So Sylvia, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Looking at the first two lines all the way up to from 2015 to 2016 to 2017. Because the nature of the questions and the concern, I think from the council was in relationship to how the department was going to handle the change
Right.
in our city ordinance. And from what I can see from 2015 to 2016 and 2017, basically the city ordinance is cut in half, right?
yes.
The number of and so the 51 at the top, I'm still somewhat concerned about.
Okay.
I'm clear that you're saying that doesn't mean that they were charged with anything.
Correct.
But-
I know for a fact they were not charged with anything. We do not possess, we did not buy the civil violation tickets that are required to issue those civil violations.
So anyone, basically, outside of any other charges or any other violation of the law, if they were caught with 10 grams or less, there was no issue.
It's possible that of the 22 and the 19 city ordinance ones, it's possible that those could be city ordinances violations. They could still be issued a city ordinance violation, which is also a civil offense.
For the 10 grams or less.
Sure, yes. But what's important also to notice is, Aaron, in the cannabis possession in the second section, because I think one of the other things that was brought up was, are we going to charge people state more often
Right.
because you reduced the fine? So then those numbers and the cannabis grams, 30 grams and under, that one that says that the old violation, and then the cannabis possessions of 10 to 100 grams, those numbers and how those add up to the previous years for how many people were charged with that offense. So those did not go up after you changed the fine amount from 300 to 50. They still went way, way down.
And so the sort of explanation we would offer, or you would offer, for the 10 to 100 going from 1 to 5 is just, I mean, it was all zeros, and then it went from 1 to 5. Can you explain that? What?
Yeah, that's when the new law came into effect. So the law wasn't in effect in all those other years where there's zeros. It went into effect in July of 2016. We only had one of those charges in 16 and 5 of those in 17. So if you had 10 to 100 grams of cannabis, you either were one of those 6 people, or you had a city ordinance violation issued, or if it was 10, it fell under the 10 grams or under, you could be one of the 15 or 51 that had nothing happen.
So with the law changing now to 100 grams, and the fourth column saying delivery, manufacturing of cannabis under 30 grams is a misdemeanor. The delivery and manufacture, it's kind of odd to have 100 grams in one bag, right?
Yes.
So, like, I'm wondering how the police would take that in. Is it automatically, if I got 50 grams in one bag and 50 in another one, it's delivery?
No.
Okay, so I was just wondering how you
No, it's all
instructed
kind of
in
a
the process.
totality of the circumstances. Are there, depending on if there's a person or in someone's houses, do they have a bunch of baggies and baggy corners, and do they have scales, and does it look like they've been packaging it and have
So you really
all
go
of
through an
those
in-depth
things?
look at it. You're not
Yes.
just saying, okay, it's not in
Oh, you
one
have 2
package.
bags, you must be selling it. No, that's not necessarily, no. We'd have to have way more than that for the state's attorney to charge anything like that.
Well, okay. I won't get into all of that.
Okay.
Okay, that's helpful.
All right, so the third section is the felony amounts, the old amount, which was over 30 grams, and then the new charge, which is over the 100 grams. So that's why there are lots of zeros on those lines as well. And then the furthest down line, or the furthest down section, is some of the more less. We don't use them very often, but we still have those offenses, and they are charged occasionally depending on what the circumstances are.
So, Silvio, in that section, will delivery, manufacture of cannabis over 30 grams felony, so that one still is a thing, or is it?
Yes, it's over 30 grams is a felony. Under 30 grams, delivery or manufacture is a misdemeanor.
But possession between 10 and 100 is a misdemeanor, and over 100 is a felony? So they changed one part of it, but they didn't change the other?
I'm sorry, say that again.
So we're talking about possession versus delivery and manufacture.
Yes, they only changed the possession
They did
portion
not,
of the law.
They did not
Correct.
change
That's correct.
delivery, manufacture.
That's
That
correct.
still remains at 30.
Yes.
Okay, that's what I'm just trying to clarify.
Yes. Okay, and so the next slide, or the next paper, is then kind of takes those sections, those same sections, and shows you how many offenses there were total. So if you look back on the first page, the 51 and the 19 in 2017 on that top section for the civil charges equals 70. And then it shows you on the bottom line how many NTAs were issued. So this is where it's important to note that that number, if you add those numbers up, that they don't necessarily jive with the amount of times the crime code might be on the police report. So that's where it gets a little complicated. But only 21 NTAs were issued. We know that 51 didn't have anything happen, but there were 21 NTAs issued, even though there were only 19 city ordinance crime codes written on a police report. So that means at least 2 of those police reports had 2 people, or maybe one of them had 3 people that were then issued NTAs for that charge. Right. So if that makes sense, if that makes... All right, and then it just breaks down to the next one, which is the misdemeanors, shows how many of those offenses, how many NTAs were issued, or how many times somebody was taken into custodial arrest. For these misdemeanors, over 88% of the charges in the last 3 years, 2015, 16, and 17, over 88% of those misdemeanor cannabis charges were someone was arrested for other criminal violations, not just the misdemeanor. So 105 of those violations, there were, I got the number here somewhere, 12 people that just had a misdemeanor charge when they were arrested.
So the other part of this conversation was how would cannabis be used for, or cannabis arrests be used to do further policing or for a more serious charge and stuff like that. So it sounds like you're saying that 88% of the people who were given a violation, they were also arrested for something else, or?
Yeah, so say they were shoplifting, for instance, and then they were also we found that they had cannabis in their pockets. They had some other charge that they were arrested for. They weren't arrested just for the cannabis violation. Only 12 people were arrested for a cannabis violation only.
Okay, so
in 3 years' time.
In 3 years?
Yes, in 3 years' time.
So in a situation where you arrest somebody who was shoplifting or something like that, and they have a small amount of cannabis on them, does it, I mean, if it's just like as you described, if it's a joint or something like that, that's going to automatically going to report, or what discretion do you guys have to say this is going in the trash or something like that?
It will go on the police report so that we can track it. It's we prefer that I would take that as evidence. I would put it into evidence and make it clear in the report that nobody's being charged with that. If I were going to, if it was under the 10 grams, say, and it would be a civil violation anyway, I'm not going to charge anybody with it, then it would be disposed of appropriately, not in the garbage. Okay. So that's how we prefer that is handled. I'm not saying that it's never been happened.
It gets burned one way or the other. Is
correct.
That what you're saying? Okay.
I'm not saying that's never happened, that an officer hasn't, ground it out on the ground. I mean, I've seen that happen in the past, obviously. I'm not saying that never happens, but we prefer that they take it and we dispose of it the appropriate way. So it would be, the crime code would have to be on the police report, but that doesn't necessarily mean somebody was charged with it. Or so if someone was taken to jail for shoplifting, for instance, and they had a possession of cannabis charge as well, and they put both of those on the paperwork at the jail, then both of those show up as them being arrested for both of those things.
And then that's when it's the discretion of the state's attorney to either charge for both of those
correct.
things. Right.
Yes. All right, and then obviously the next two sections are the same. They're the offenses, NTAs, and custodial arrests made for the felony possessions, and then the more serious felony cannabis crimes.
So in that third box, you had a felony arrest or a felony offense, but there was no NTA and no custodial arrest made.
Correct.
So the person didn't have to go to court or go to jail, but it was a felony arrest?
It appears so. Well, it was a felony. A felony crime code was written on a police report. And without pulling the police report, I mean, I don't know what happened in that particular case. I'm just saying, yes, there was no arrest made or NTA issued.
But that's kind of odd, though.
So the offenses for that's going to be the cannabis possession of 100 grams, because if I look back to the other chart, that's that one arrest from 2017 with the new charge. So either it's possible again, it was just last year. It's possible they haven't been charged yet, they haven't been arrested yet, that there's some other circumstances why it's not showing up as an arrest or we wouldn't normally issue an NTA for a felony. I'm not saying it never happens, but it's not a preferred way of handling felonies. Usually, state NTAs are given for misdemeanors and not felonies. But nevertheless, you're correct. It does say that there's one and that there was no custodial arrest or an NTA issued.
So last one for me, as far as the department, as you're looking at the department going forward, have you seen an uptick or any sort of concerns from your standpoint with the more relaxed laws and ordinances around marijuana possession? Are you seeing that as a problem?
In what regard?
How, on the impact on the department or your ability to police or any of that?
No, I don't think there's much of a difference for us. I mean, we decide, we just uphold the law, or we charge the, well, not charge it, but arrest people for it, or hold, give people NTAs for whatever the law is. So when you guys make changes to it, that's what we do. And same with the state law that changed, that we just, whatever it is, that's what we go by. I don't think there's been a big change in enforcement action. It looks like things are, moving in the direction that I think the whole country is, as far as cannabis and the thoughts surrounding that. So I'm not surprised by that, and I think it's kind of what is expected at this point.
Thank you.
Jared?
I think what Aaron was trying to get at is that he's implying that Urbana has not descended into chaos because of our actions to reduce the fines.
Reefer madness.
Reefer madness.
I have
We
not
have
witnessed
not
any reefer
crumbled
mad.
into anarchy. That people know that we're more relaxed. That, yeah. Is that your assessment, Chief Morgan?
I have not noticed any negative impacts.
Is
Thank
the
you.
Sales tax at Domino's increased?
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Sylvia. We have a report from Vasilia Clark.
Well, good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Or good morning. Or
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. I'm sitting here so that I can recap and summarize the meeting that we had on January 23rd. Thanks, Aaron. January 23rd, the IDOT community meeting, and it was a general discussion that took place. It was a facilitated discussion. We had about 50 to 60 people who came, and first of all, I wanted to thank you, many of you who came out that evening, as well as our CPRB members and our HRC members, our Human Relations Commission members. So they volunteered their time. I recruited the HRC to act as facilitators, but in the process of getting them there, many of them had previous engagements and things like that, so they could not participate in the activity. So each group chose their own facilitators, and there was about an hour discussion on questions that staff had put together. We had 5 questions that we targeted and discussed individually, and after that discussion, we came back as a group, and each facilitator reported back for their particular group. At this point, we're putting all the notes together and we will be sharing them with the police department, the staff there, and trying to figure out where do we go from here in terms of our plan. And we would like very much to, after we figure that out, we will come back to the council and we're going to report back to you, and we're also going to stay very close in communications with the people who actually came out. We had about, we got their email addresses, and most of the people seemed to be very interested. I think it was a very congenial meeting. It wasn't a lot of hostility or anger. And so I'm very hopeful that we can move to phase 2 in this process and start to actually come together and formulate an actual plan. Any questions?
Aaron?
So just a comment for me was that from the standpoint of being in many meetings and community meetings where staff or the city or the agency takes 45 minutes of the hour explaining and then leaves 10 minutes for questioning answers and 5 minutes to clean up, it was much better to have so much time spent and dedicated to the individuals who were there having the opportunity to express their concerns, ask questions, or whatever their thoughts were, right? I thought you guys did a good job of facilitating that and making that happen to make sure you extracted the perspective of the people who were there, right? So I just wanted to say thank you. I thought it was well done.
Well, thank you. And I have to give a lot of credit in terms of the boots on the ground, and someone who went out and really marketed the meeting was Preston James. And he also facilitated the meeting that evening, and I think he did a really great job. So I want to say kudos to Preston for doing that.
Bill?
Yeah, I thought it was a great meeting too, and really appreciate all the work you guys did. I know that Todd especially was taking vigorous notes and making sure you got everything, copious notes, and getting everything down. And I wondered if that a lot of the stories had to do with how people felt under certain circumstances. Maybe they didn't understand the police objectives at the time when they were stopped. I wondered if that had been passed along to the police department and if they had a chance to at least see what people were talking about there. I know that we didn't want them there to prevent people from talking, but presumably they got some kind of information from that.
Well, we've compiled all the notes, and I'm not sure if we've actually sent them to the police administration, but we are in the process of doing that if we have not. And it's all everybody's comments. We took the comments raw, and we didn't try to interpret what someone was saying. We put their actual comments.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would just like to acknowledge the incredible amount of work that Vasilia Clark, Preston James, Monique James, and put into this, particularly in distributing flyers, knocking on doors, contacting community members, really trying to get the word out and invite and encourage as many people as possible to come. So it was I thought it was a great turnout, and thank you to Todd for taking copious notes vigorously. So,
Yes.
and they will be shared once they're all compiled. We will be meeting with the police department and sharing everything that was said, and then, as Vasilia said, a report will be made back to council.
So you just made me think of one other thing as we talked about earlier in the 5:30 meeting about our goals. And one of the things I was asking for was for the citizens to participate in the budgeting process. So, but just more involvement from the citizens. And I was speaking to this meeting as an example of reaching out, intentionally reaching out to get more involvement from the community members. And so as I think about that, I also would go back to my comments as we left that meeting about also being very inclusive of individuals who have been working in the community on different issues, such as this particular issue, and really embracing their concerns, and even when they challenge the narrative or the culture of the city or of the police department or any department, as Councilmember Wu was talking about, there may be concerns with other aspects of our departments as well, but it really takes a lot for us to move the entire city forward, for, even when the city administration is being challenged, to also accept those challenges and say, okay, this is what the community is saying to us. We need to embrace these so that we can be representative of the community. So I think that type of meeting, what we saw the other night, and what we've seen around the IDOT traffic stop work at this particular point, is moving in that direction. I just wanted to be also very inclusive of the individuals who have put a lot of time in, that made it easy for Preston to facilitate. You understand what I'm saying, just to make sure that we're inclusive of that whole process.
Well, hopefully this is just a primer list of folks that we have, and that they will then tell others about our Phase 2 meeting when that occurs. So I'm very hopeful that they were just the primer group.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Vasilia. New business. We have 2 ordinances related to the former Washington school site. So ordinance number 2018-02-006, which is an ordinance amending the Urbana Comprehensive Plan map, changing 1102 North Broadway from institutional to residential. Kevin Garcia.
Okay, thank you. So yes, these are 2 requests for the Washington school site up on North Broadway. The initial requests were to change the future land use designation in the comprehensive plan from institutional to mixed residential. And the other request was to rezone the property from CRE to R4, medium density multiple family residential. At the Plan Commission meeting, they voted to recommend the property be rezoned to the R3 district, and they also recommended that the proposed future land use designation be changed from institutional to residential urban pattern. Both of those recommendations are of lower intensity than was initially sought by the school district. I did speak with a representative from the school district today, and they indicated that while they'd prefer the R4 and the mixed residential as they initially sought, they don't think that the recommendations from the Plan Commission would negatively impact them. So, for a really quick background, Washington School was built in 1925. In 2013, the buildings were no longer useful as a school, so the school was closed. The school district thought they might reuse the buildings initially, but the cost would be prohibitively expensive, so they have been actively trying to sell the property, and these 2 requests would help them do that. Regarding the proposed comprehensive plan amendment, when the comp plan was adopted back in 2005, Washington School was still in use, and there were no plans to close the school or redevelop the site. So at that point, it made sense to call it institutional, which is what it is in the comp plan. Now that the school has been closed, reassessing the future land use for the site now makes sense. So the recommendation at the Plan Commission meeting is to change the future land use designation to residential urban pattern, and that would consist primarily of single-family residential housing in your typical urban street grid pattern of development. Regarding the proposed rezoning, the R3 zoning district that was recommended by the Plan Commission is a good option for the site. It would allow it to correspond to both the proposed residential urban pattern future land use designation. It would also help it blend in with the surrounding neighborhood. All of the surrounding area is zoned R3, and it's full of mostly single-family residences, so it really makes sense for that site. Importantly, the R3 zone would allow for residential planned unit developments, so if a developer came in and wanted to reuse the existing school buildings for residential uses, they could still do that. In rezoning cases, we always look at the LaSalle criteria. I will not go through all of those right now, other than to say that the proposal meets them, and you can see your memo for more info on that. So at the Plan Commission meeting, there were quite a few neighbors that came out, and all the neighbors that spoke were against rezoning to R4, but many were supportive of rezoning to R3, which again would allow uses that would be more compatible with the neighborhood. So the Plan Commission concurred with those sentiments and then recommended rezoning to R3 and changing the designation, the future land use designation of the property from institutional to residential urban pattern. Staff concurs with that recommendation, and that concludes my report. I can take any questions if you have any.
Bill?
Yeah, thanks. I'm real familiar with this neighborhood, and I remember going to the Washington School when I was like 10 years old, probably to their fairs they had there and stuff. If somebody, I mean, I watched the Plan Commission meeting, and it looked like people were pretty much writing off the possibility of that school being reused. If somebody did want to reuse the school, turn it into loft apartments like they have in Champaign in a couple of schools, Columbia School and the one on State Street, and if they wanted to, in my dreams, it'd be some nice condos that I might think about buying someday that would be kind of like the Delmont Court kind of, brick condos, 2 to 3 stories. Would that be allowable in a planned use development in this designation, R3 designation?
It would if somebody had, if somebody brought that proposal forward, and then of course if it went through Plan Commission and then City Council, that could be something that would be allowed.
So the only thing that the planned use development would exclude under R3 would be a business use, right? It couldn't be a mixed use. It would have to be a residential.
It's only residential planned unit developments.
And, okay, that's good. Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion. I'll move that we send ordinance number 2018-02-006, an ordinance amending the Urbana Comprehensive Plan map for changing 1102 North Broadway Avenue from institutional to residential urban pattern forward to,
This is the council, so you'll be moving
so we're moving
to approve it.
for approval.
Okay.
I'll
Is there a
second.
second? Moved by Jared, seconded by Dennis. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I wanted to make sure that we were clear. I know Kevin said that many of the residents were opposed to R4 but supportive of R3, right? I don't know if I misread that, but the ordinance is for R3 or 4?
3.
Okay, I don't know how I missed that. Okay, I just want to make sure I had it right. I'm fine.
Okay, okay. Will the clerk please call the roll?
City Council Members Ammons.
Yes.
Brown.
Yes.
Hazen. Yes. Jacobson.
Yes.
Miller. Yes. Roberts.
Yes.
Wu.
Yes.
That motion passes. Next is ordinance 2018-02-007. Is there a motion?
Sure, I'll make a motion to accept and pass ordinance number 2018-02-007, an ordinance amending the Urbana zoning map, rezoning 3.5 acres at 1102 North Broadway Avenue from CRE, that's, can't remember what
Conservation, recreation, educational.
you got it. Well, actually, it says so right next to it. Conservation, recreation, education to R3, which is a 2-family residential zoning district.
Single and 2-family.
Single and 2-family, and that actually allows people to have duplexes. Yes.
I'll second.
Moved by Dennis, seconded by Mary Alice. Any further discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
City Council Members Ammons.
Yes.
Brown.
Yes.
Hazen. Yes. Jacobson.
Yes.
Miller.
Yes.
Roberts.
Yes.
And Wu.
Yes.
That motion passes. Next up is resolution number 2018-02-004R, a resolution regarding the release of closed session minutes for the period ending January 31st, 2018.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Aaron, seconded by
Mayor,
Eric.
we need to, first, we need, per my memo, we have to do a resolution on resolutions waiver.
We have to pass the resolution on resolutions to pass it.
Right, we just need to move to you need a supermajority vote allowing consideration of this resolution because of the resolution on resolutions rule.
Can we just say?
So the motion is to move to consider this,
Is to suspend the resolution on resolutions.
move to suspend the resolution on resolutions.
And that's just a voice vote.
So moved.
Second.
It's moved by Bill, seconded by Mary Alice. All those in favor of moving to suspend the resolution on resolutions, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. That motion passes. Now we go back to Resolution 2018-02-004R. It was moved by Aaron, seconded by Eric. Any discussion or questions? Will the clerk please call the roll?
City Council members Ammons.
Yes.
Brown.
Yes.
Hazen. Jacobson.
Yes.
Miller.
Yes.
Roberts.
Yes.
And Wu.
Yes.
That motion passes. Last item on the agenda is appointment to boards and commissions, and I hope this is easier than our last one. I'm very pleased to submit the following appointment for your approval, and that's to the Plan Commission, Chen-Ji Yu. I'm recommending the appointment of Shen-Ji Yu, Ph.D., to the Urbana Plan Commission. Dr. Yu has lived in the city of Urbana for 8 years. She holds MS and Ph.D. degrees in urban planning from UIUC. She's employed at State Farm Bank as a statistician, building predictive and forecasting models. She also co-owns 129 North Race Street, Urbana. That's the site that our adjacency will occupy. And she's a landlord in Urbana and Champaign. Is there a motion for her appointment? Bill?
I move approval of Sunyi Yu for the Plan Commission.
I'll second.
Moved by Bill, seconded by Jared. Any discussion? Okay. Will all those in favor please say aye?
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. That motion passes. Yes.
I had received a call from a constituent really wanting some resolution to a concern about parking. Also, I meant to bring this up earlier, but I didn't want to mix the issues. And it's about Carl employees on parking on the residential streets. And I just wanted to make sure I raised it because she wanted me to do that. She may be coming at a later time to be more specific about the concern, but I know for sure on the, it's still North Busey, but it's still on the southern end of North Busey, closer to the Carl campus, where several employees, many of them park about midway down my block going south, taking up a lot of the parking for in front of the areas and in front of the homeowners and stuff. And I don't know, I just wanted us to have a further discussion or get some clarity on that, on how that can be handled. So I just wanted to make sure I raised that. I don't know if she was watching or not, but all right. Immediate resolution. I like that, Bill.
Just today, we went over the status of Traffic Commission agenda items, and I know this is soon to come up at a Traffic Commission item, not for this month, but it may be for next month. But
Okay.
there has been at least one or maybe two meetings to get input from the area residents. There's been some study and statistics gathered on parking and to what level and how far north of Fairview and north of Church and that sort of thing. And I don't know, it's not this month, but it may be April or March Traffic Commission meeting. But if you want, I could have one of the staff members contact you on the status of that.
I would appreciate it. Thank
Yeah.
you, Bill.
Okay.
And that brings up a good point. For items like this, with issues like this, the Traffic Commission is the place to start to bring people's concerns to. And they meet once a month. And this is chaired by Dean Hazen.
That's where you
Okay.
got the scooter from?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Which looks like North Dakota. Or South Dakota. All right, with no further business before this body, the meeting is adjourned.